But at the same time, once again, you didn't answer my question, which is kind of an important part. How many black kids are applying to Yale every year?
Are you just saying contention that while you concede that this is a problem, what David is
absolutely a problem,
but the problem you're talking about is considerably bigger. Is that?
Well, it's a matter. It's literally a matter of. I mean, I've been to Yale campus several times. I've been to Princeton campus. I've been to Harvard's campus. Listen when I tell you, there are plenty of white and Asian Americans there, and there are very little to no black. So, like, whenever you hear like discrimination, I'm like, okay, discrimination in favor of who? Because you're never just discriminating against one group. There has to be someone who is receiving the positive benefits of that.
Well, this is discrimination in favor of African Americans.
But how many African? This is what I said. Once again, it goes back to my question. You would have to be a bit for me to think this is like a serious problem, like that it's affecting the outcome of the overall success of those races. You would have to basically tell me I go to Yale campus and I'm seeing 50% of the population being black.
But
so that's where the line is.
I do have a question for you.
Racism is bad.
Hang on, can the girl speak for a second?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I think racism is always a serious problem, and it doesn't really matter which group it's affected to. But I mean, honestly, my answer to this question is people have got to stop putting Ivy League schools on a pedestal as the ultimate educational achievement. That is the answer.
But it's happening.
I think the answer is elimination of discrimination, and people should be able to go to the schools that they want to. And if you want to go to Harvard and get a great education, you should be able to do that without being badmouthed. It's fine to want to go to Harvard. It's fine to want to go. It's fine to study your ass off to go to Harvard. And it's horrible being a person who was raised with a mother who punished me every time I got bad grades. Being a person who did not get leniency in my grades.
By the way, but it's not just Harvard. It's actually, it's UT Austin. It's
Yeah.
other. It's
You know,
other.
but you know,
This is really awful stuff here. Like, this is real current systemic racism.
There are two really important things I wanted to point out about that exchange just now. Now, if you were to tell me that story, so yes, if you were to tell me that story in a vacuum just now, and I were to come up in response to that and say, 50 kids died yesterday, and you're worried about like, people not getting into Harvard? What is wrong with you? You would recognize that for what it is, which would be whataboutism. You're trying to divert the question. So when we're on a panel about racial equality, and it is inarguable that we have immense racial disparities in this country. I have 1,000 studies say that we have, not 1,000, but I have a ton of studies saying we have implicit bias right now, and there are a ton of historical studies done that say that historical racism is the reason for these racial disparities. If you were to come up and say, well, what about these two schools that make up 0.0001% of the population, you would recognize that as whataboutism. And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't, and it does not mean that we shouldn't acknowledge that in this instance, it is terrible.
Yeah, but it's an example, though, of what we're talking about. Like, because the question really was, what are the obstacles to racial inequity, right? And the question is, do we use racial inequity to fight racial inequity? Because this is the subtext of the conversation.
Yes. But that's not racial. But that's also not racial inequity, because if in the same breath, which is I hear that story a lot, by the way, because I heard it in 2016, 2017 too, and I still had a problem with that because I'm against racism in all of its forms, and I think every form of racism should be addressed, right? It's not a matter of like, and I firmly believe that. Now, in that same breath, UCLA got caught discriminating against black people, and 70% of their entire undergraduate population is Asian. Did you know that? 70%. 70%. You know how good of a job and how much opportunity you can get from going to UCLA?